Good morning, everyone. I'm afraid we switched to English, but buenos dias, good morning. And thank you very much to One Welfare organisers, to Rebecca and the team for inviting me to chair today's opening session on One Welfare and fashion. Are we what we eat, wear and have? Being involved with the charity World Horse Welfare that I am, I know how closely intertwined animals and fashion can be. Logos of some of the most famous global brands, luxury brands, are based on horses: Ferrari, Coach, Ralph Lauren. And horses are often used as status symbols and bred for characteristics such as speed, height or strength. This can be fine if they are bred responsibly for a particular job. But there is no doubt the significant welfare problems that can arise when there is too much breeding or inbreeding for a particular characteristic, or when horses are encouraged to look overweight or even obese just to win in a show ring. When animals are status symbols, there are real risks that their owners might not appreciate the needs of their animals as sentient beings. And another problem is when horses are bred to satisfy a particular trend, such as around 15 years ago with the American trend for British gypsy cobs, or more recently in the UK with miniature breeds, and with the inevitable consequence when those fads of those fashions goes out of fashion. And then, of course, there is the global trade in donkey skins to make Yizhao, a collagen-based Chinese remedy that is believed to have a number of benefits for human well-being. But it is fueling donkey theft in the poorest communities around the world and the unsustainable slaughter of millions of donkeys every year. And then, of course, there's the tack, the harness, the rugs, the other equipment, and the clothing that goes with the equine sector. And this is just equines. The welfare of so many other animals is impacted by fashion. And today, I'm delighted that we'll hear examples from wild vicuñas, rescue dogs, and working equids. But before that, I was due to be introducing Senat Gebrab from the Instituto Maragoni in London, but unfortunately Senat has had to pull out at the last minute. So, for One Welfare, especially one time, we have the Sister Act. I'm delighted that Rebecca, who you all know so well, and her sister Aída are going to step in and provide this keynote presentation. Rebecca, as many of you know, is a European veterinary specialist in animal welfare, science, ethics and law, and is president, or soon to be president, of the Association of Government Vets in the UK. And Aída, her sister, is an architect since 2014, who's worked in London, Lisbon and Geneva, and worked for companies to improve their workspaces. She's a co-founder now of the company Too Bold, based in Madrid, and she specializes in startups. So Aída and Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you. Again, everybody, and yes, this was unexpected, but I hope you all enjoy our presentation of the notes and speech that Senait has shared with us. So we hope we managed to transmit her keynote message as well, and we've adapted them to architecture and animals as well. So hopefully the three-way combo will work nicely to introduce this very important topic, which talks about sustainable fashion and design. So I'd like to hand over to my sister, who is going to start up.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here with you, sharing this moment. Well, we've used this sentence that's quite well known. You probably already have heard it. Everything is design. And it was said by Paul Rand in the 50s. And it's meant to draw our attention to everything that surrounds us, not only the objects or clothes or spaces, but also the ways they are produced, because those processes have also had a reflection behind, and they've been designed as well. So, fashion and design industries continue to redefine themselves. This has happened always, no? Like, trends are not something new, and every time they are going faster due to globalization. And it is imperative that we acknowledge our responsibilities towards people, animals, and environment. These are dynamic and influential forces shaping trends and lifestyles across the globe, and they pride themselves on creativity, innovation, and the power to express individuality. But currently, they are undergoing a growing awareness and a significant shift, because everything we do, every decision we make, linked not only to fashion but also to design, has an impact around ourselves, right? So this sentence is a bit more contemporary. It was said by Brian Reed, which is a UX designer. It's from, let's say, around 2012, more or less. And it says, everything is designed, few things are designed well, meaning not only the final product, as we said, but also the process and how things were built or how they became what they are, but also how their life will be and what will happen with them when they are not necessary or useful anymore. So currently, going back to this shift we were talking about, consumers are being more aware of this, and they are demanding transparency, accountability, and ethical practices in the fashion and design choices they make. They are increasingly concerned about the treatment of animals and respect toward the environment in the production of clothing, furniture, and any kind of products in the end. This shift is driven by a collective understanding that compassion and design can coexist, that style need not come at the expense of suffering of people, animals, or the planet. The adoption of cruelty-free, vegan, and sustainable materials is on the rise, and we can see many examples, such as innovative fabrics emerging from plant-based sources, synthetic leather alternatives that mimic the look and feel of their animal-derived counterparts, building materials made out of recycled plastics, new animal breeds, and many others. For instance, here we can see two examples. The first one is a product developed by fishing nets, which are fished from the ocean and made into panels that can afterwards be processed into pieces of furniture, for instance. This is not only a way to clean the oceans and save the animals and the living beings over there, but also it's a way to reduce the production we have to stop, not at the moment. So it's about reducing the use of plastic, but also about reincorporating that which is not necessary or useful anymore. On the other side, we see a picture of a T-shirt, which is actually a One Welfare T-shirt. And it's made out of a new product also, which is called Remil, which is made out of 50% recycled clothes and 50% of organic cotton. So it's also a way to start incorporating better practices in our production. Currently also there's a big demand from consumers of transparency. This is a very popular word at the moment. We have to be also aware always to not get greenwashed or get fooled by this greenwashing, right? But brands are also becoming more open about their sourcing and production processes, and they are allowing consumers to make informed choices. And this extends to certifications and standards that ensure ethical treatment of animals, such as certified cruelty-free label, and that guarantee sustainable practices as well, such as the LEED certification, for instance, which is very common currently in architecture, and it's meant to provide better environments, but also made out with more sustainable processes. We can see also a picture there, which is a bit of a reflection of this transparency that's happily trendy now. And it's by a well-known brand, fashion brand, which on Black Friday 2011, I think it was, they put this advert out there, and all the small letters you can see there are explaining why you shouldn't buy this jacket if you don't really need it, because it's polluting, and it gives you the data on the impact it's having on the environment. And they are saying, we are looking forward for you to use clothes that are long-lasting, and this jacket is long-lasting, but if you already have one, don't buy it. Well, this is just a little example to see that some companies are doing it with a strong impact. But well, going back to the topic, the status of animal welfare and sustainability in the fashion and design industries are evolving, and the trajectory seems very positive with examples like this. However, our journey towards truly compassionate and sustainable businesses requires collective effort. So maybe, Rebecca, you can guide us on what can be done.
Yeah, lots of things can be done, I think. So basically we have 3 key points that Senate flagged for us. So what can we do as individuals? And it is really common sense. We can choose to support brands that are prioritizing animal welfare and sustainability and always taking into account greenwashing. So we see a lot of messaging. We are bombarded by messages, but what science or what evidence is behind those messages? So I guess it's for every individual to become a responsible consumer and to actually understand what is behind the products that we are choosing to use or to buy or to consume. Designers can also support change by innovating, by seeking new materials and processes that respect not only their customer base, but also animals, people, and the planet. And there is quite a lot there to do, and Aída has provided some examples. And also at the governance level, policymakers have a role there where they can enact and enforce regulations that are protecting animals, incentivize ethical practices, and protect the environment as well. So there are many different levels that need to come together collectively to actually materialize this change. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think this is? You can shout if you're in the audience, or you can just think it in your head. Cuero, leather. Yes, it can be leather, yes. Any other thoughts? But yeah, the most common thing that comes to our minds is leather. Actually, neither of those products is real leather. They are actually leather products made from different materials. Polyurethane, I think, was one of them. Is artificial leather. So the materials are really transforming. They really look like the animal-based products, but there is this fashion and this trend. They are being phased out. Less animals have been used. There is still leather produced as a byproduct from meat consumption, for example. So if all leather is replaced by this, what happens to the other leather? So there are a lot of questions we need to think about on this path towards transformation and new designs, and to take into account all the impacts holistically in different ways. The key 4 trends that the Senate mentioned in her keynote that we are passing on is, the first one was transparency and accountability. And she basically thought that transparency and accountability is extending to all the animal-derived materials in the fashion industry, whether it would be fur, leather, but also wool or exotic skins. And consumers are demanding that brands not only disclose their sourcing practices, but also they take steps to ensure animal welfare and human labor standards throughout the supply chain. And we have seen different products, not only on fashion, but also consumables, like there are many foods you can buy where they talk about how these products have been produced in a particular way, in a particular labor, preserving, ensuring there is no child labor, for example. So there is a lot of ethical focus on labor standards as well, not just animal standards, or animal welfare standards, I should say. Sustainable product alternatives. Innovation in technology is crucial here, and material science have given rise to cruelty-free and animal-free or more environmentally friendly alternatives that are both stylish and ethical. And that transformation is a current trend, and we can see increasingly in many different shops this choice of products, and that's already growing. Vegan leather, for example, is becoming increasingly popular, and is virtually indistinguishable, as we have seen, from traditional leather in terms of look and the feel as well now. Replacing building materials which production involves high amounts of energy and pollution, such as concrete or iron, for natural alternatives like wood which capture CO2 from the environment instead, are also trends in the construction and building industry. If we move to ethical practices in fashion and design, animals, ensuring that animals are treated with dignity and respect, and that they are not subject to poor animal welfare practices, cruel practices, such as live feather plucking, or force feeding, or animal testing, or indiscriminate breeding. And that's a photograph that was described as a cartoon-like Arabian horse. It looked very cute. It had a baby face, and this type of horse was produced at the expense of the suffering of the actual horses being modified in this way. People, ensuring that labor standards are adequate and respectful to our workers. Environment, ensuring that products respect the environment and minimize impacts, including transport, energy, natural resources, etc. And all of these are challenging when we live in a society that many times is money-driven and economically driven. And that's something that we need to reflect upon. Many times the economics and the positive economics are only calculated on a rule of three. This is the income, this is the output at one level, but the holistic impacts are many times neglected and not accounted for in these economical calculations. And it is the time to start accounting for the indirect economical impacts that all of these practices, all of these things that we're buying or using are having. It's a new way of calculating economics, and I call upon all the economists in the world to start thinking in this way and to try to also adopt this one welfare approach from an economical perspective, taking into account the holistic gains and the holistic losses. If we talk about consumer influence again, many consumers are already taking brands accountable for, and that's a demonstration that those of you that have visited London and walked through Oxford Street might have seen many times in front of the door of a particular brand, and those demonstrations have been quite regular for a period of time. Supporting ethical brands can be another step that consumers influence, based also on information and collaboration for change. Without collaboration, change at a global level will be very difficult because it needs the input of many different collectives and professions. So just one more comment before I'm talking about collective, and I would like to call upon the industry of events as well, since we are in an event in person, and it's how we think about how events are presented, the materials that are used, and you see we have put here a clothing piece for One Welfare instead of a vinyl printed banner that we would dispose of probably after the conference. So again, I call upon these practices, which perhaps we do not always link to animal welfare, but they are still generating a production of materials that perhaps could be done in different ways, in more efficient ways, and the resources, the natural resources that our planet has, could be utilized in different ways as well. So I will not extend, I'm sure you all have many materials on your heads, but just to flag that up is something that I've been surprised when organizing this event. And then I will leave Aída to wrap up with conclusions for all of you.
So after all the thoughts we've shared, including those of us and the person who is not present, which I can't recall her name, sorry. Senite, sorry. So, well, to conclude, fashion and design industries are at a pivotal moment in history. We still have time to make a change. We've created all this, so if we join forces, we probably can also turn it over somehow, right? These industries have the opportunity to embrace a future that values functionality, style, respect, and compassion towards animals, people, and the planet. The changes we are witnessing, the ones we talked about, greater transparency, sustainable alternatives, ethical practices, and so on, are not just trends. They are essential steps towards a more responsible and human industry. So let us all work together to ensure that fashion and design are not useful and beautiful, but also compassionate, and that they reflect the values we hold dear. We've took this sentence from Dalai Lama, which says, "Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive." So let's continue to drive positive change in the world of fashion and design. Thank you for your attention.
Rebecca and Aída, thank you very much. I think we do have the opportunity for those joining us online to provide questions. So please do go through the One Welfare conference platform to provide questions. There aren't any questions waiting at the moment. Are there any questions in the audience? Perhaps we could put the lights up in the audience if possible, so we could see. Do we have, and there is a microphone, so if you could wait for the microphone and just say who you are and where you're from, and then your question, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Abdelkader Ben Sada. I am from United Nations Environmental Program. Thanks very much to the presenter for this interesting and really fascinating presentation about sustainable fashion. Just I want to add that in 2019, an alliance of sustainable fashion has been established, led by FAO and UNEP, and is in the side of how fashion is impacting on the environment, including climate change. So it's considered like the second industry that consumes water and contribute between 5 to 6 or 7 tentative, approximately, to carbon emission. So there is this trend to go towards sustainable fashion. So I'm really happy to hear these keynotes, and I believe that also we need to change our habit, I mean, toward how to wear clothes, and we are buying more than 50% or more than that compared to what used to buying clothes 20 years ago, and some often we use them for 2 months during the winter or the summer season, then we don't use them anymore. So even those small habits that we need to change can contribute to 10 to 30% of sustainability in terms of fashion consumption and production, whether in environmental side or animal welfare sides. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose, Rebecca and Aída, how can we better coordinate? Because obviously, United Nations, there's a number of initiatives going on, and it's so often better if we can coordinate those existing initiatives more cohesively, so there's more joined up working. Have you any thoughts how we might better do that?
So this is precisely one of the reasons why I included this topic in this conference, because this is an area that is very much discussed at the fashion level, and perhaps those that are working within animal welfare or within other sectors do not come together to join up in a collective way to actually answer this particular question. So I think discussions and approaches like this really help, because they help to raise awareness of what is happening at different industries. For example, the very important work that FAO and the colleagues from the United Nations Environment Program do is probably not very well known among people attending this conference, or maybe even within people in the fashion industry, because if you are perhaps going to catwalks as part of your job, why would you read a report of FAO and UNEP? So that sort of thing, perhaps we need to include these discussions, try to come together more. And I was also thinking of one of the construction materials that was cited in our talk. Few things are designed well. And I had this flashback of my days when I was doing official inspections as a veterinarian of very, very poor designs in places where animals were slaughtered that were causing immense suffering for the animals being moved, and immense suffering to the staff working there, because they were literally fighting with those animals to move them through these very poorly designed premises. So this design also is impacting welfare at different levels, but they are completely different worlds if you compare an interior of a design with an office, with a catwalk. So I think it's finding holistic spaces that people comes with an open mind to share. I think that's very important, sharing, and then coming together to find solutions. So I think dialogue probably is a good start. I don't know if Aída wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think that's the starting point for almost everything, right? Especially good things. Yeah, and also regarding the design itself, like the last step, let's say, I think conversation over there is also super useful. In fact, in my studio, during our practice, what we do is actually talk a lot to the final users, because we can think as a designers, it might seem like a simple challenge, no, to solve a space, but then in the end you have to understand how people are going to use it, what special needs they have. So in this case, for instance, having some field work field, being at those farms or whatever, like with the staff and seeing the animals would have been very useful. So maybe the next generation of designers is more concerned about this final user.
Thank you very much. I think it just shows the uniqueness of this discussion, the fact that slaughterhouses and catwalks are being used in the same discussion, but that's the reality of what we're here about today. Any other questions from the floor?
So we have a question in Spanish remotely from Santiago Henao Villegas from Colombia. Thank you, Santiago. What do you think about the use of clothing that simulate real leather? Do you think they are for protection? I'm not quite sure what the second part means, but I mean the usage of clothing that simulates animal clothing, I think that is a trend. I don't have the knowledge of the actual materials, how they are produced, how much they equate to the actual product. So I don't feel capable to answer this question within my veterinary knowledge. I think that's something I probably would refer to a clothing fashion specialist. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, I've had some conversations, not specifically on this topic, but on vegan food, for instance, like black pudding made out of vegetable sources. And I was talking about this with a friend and wondering whether it made sense. I think it can be a similar question, no? Like to simulate something that's coming from an animal, just in order to still be able to use it. And the final thought we shared, which I would like to share with you now, is that maybe in order to do a transition towards these new materials or food we are discovering at the moment, we need to try and do this kind of a smooth change by replicating what we are actually used to using, no? Like for instance the fake leather. Maybe in the end, when we develop new products out of these natural sources or recycled plastics or whatever, they will within the time disappear. I don't know. It's an open question, I guess, but this is my reflection so far.
Brilliant. One question maybe, thinking from a UK perspective, there's been surveys for many years that people sort of within the food chain, and when they're thinking about their meat choices, if they eat meat, they talk about the importance of prioritising animal welfare. Yet at point of sale, people so often go to the cheaper, especially in the cost of living crisis we are in today across so many different countries. So people sometimes, it's obviously changing, but people sometimes say one thing and then do another. How can we, do you think, best sort of change people's behaviour to really think longer term when they're making fashion, when they're buying clothing, when they're making these kind of choices?
Yeah, that's a very challenging one because, yeah, it's an ongoing discussion that is being had in many different countries, not just in the UK, I would say. I think we have experts here on behavior change, so it would be interesting to hear their thoughts. But I think when you are in the conundrum where the trends from the population is one thing is said, but it's not happening, you just have to maybe encourage that change. And I would give an example which is from the UK in terms of eggs, for example, where at one point all the big retailers and supermarkets just decided not to sell any more cage hen eggs. So the choice was just not there. You just had to buy non-cage eggs. So that is a solution when you are stuck against something. You just encourage that change in a different way.
Any thoughts from you? Anyone who wants to contribute to that? Yes, the question at the back there, please.
Hello, thanks so much. My name is Courtney Price from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and privileged to be working on behavioral science and innovation in the Office of Innovation there, and grateful to Rebecca and the team for the invitation to be here together with you today. I had to chime in on your extremely challenging question around behavior change, not with an answer, but with some ideas on how industry and also civil society are approaching this challenge with an increasing emphasis on context and design of physical environments, psychological environments, as well as, of course, traditional communication methods. So one of the things I think we need to ask ourselves is, do we know why people don't do the behavior we're looking for? And can we incorporate behavioral diagnostics, understanding drivers of behavior a bit more into our plans, both for the design of choice architecture, which is the context around choices, as well as our advocacy and communication campaigns. For example, we know very well in food choice at supermarkets that the most expensive, high marked up chocolate items, etc., are at the eye level of children, because children are the behavioral lever that drives to the purchase of said item. So we could think about ways to make more sustainable, ethically sourced and produced items more visible, more salient, more readily available for our automatic processes to purchase, and work with shop owners that hold our same values to redesign those environments. That could be an interesting area of research that we could embark on together, but not a solution, but an idea for collaboration, and thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you very much. No other questions online. Any other questions in the audience? No, if not, yes, one more. At the front here, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mitja Schedelbauer. I'm with the European Commission. This is a very, very interesting discussion for me, and I'm glad to hear that there are experts on behavioral change here in the audience as well. What Aída said about replacing one product with another that looks and feels like the one that I'm not supposed to use anymore. I wonder how sustainable this strategy is. I mean, if I only change one thing, for example, if I don't use leather and I replace it with artificial leather, I guess it's fine. But then if I choose to change, 2/3 of my life by, eating tofu in the shape of roast turkey and not turkey, not eggs, but egg replacements. So I changed so many things in my life. Don't I, with time, get into a situation that I say, okay, that's enough? Do you know what I mean? This to me is a point that I don't know whether there is research on this, but how sustainable this kind of strategy would be. Thank you.
Okay. Well, to tell the truth, I share your concern or your question. I guess it's about making a smooth transition, right? Because otherwise, if all these new products, either fabrics or clothes or textile or whichever kind of product, were like from like extraterrestrial, let's say, no, like super new, everything was super new, I think the adoption would be very, very slow. So this is a way to maybe boost it. Probably, this is my point of view, but I have no clue to tell the truth. I think it will, within the time, change and we'll have new products with these sources. But probably otherwise we'll be living in Truman Show, right? So this is my opinion.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I think it's all about evolution, and I think innovation is important. So I think that's something that needs to be encouraged. It is true that some products will be designed to stay, others will fizzle out and disappear. But I think the key to all of this is to promote innovation, but also to ensure that information and evidence base is behind these products and these changes. And that is something that many times we lack. Like you, I don't really know what is behind these alternative leathers, for example. And that information sometimes is difficult to find, and also with meat replacement foods are difficult to find those details and scientific evidence backing behind it. So I think informed innovation probably would be a good start for me, but yeah, it's a very good point, thank you.
It's a fascinating point, the fact that I've recently read a book called A Future Normal, and actually what's a futurist will say what is going to happen in the future is normal, looking at what's normal today and what was sort of freakish only a few years ago. So it's actually began, and I think in answer to your question, I think if everyone else was not doing anything different, if society didn't move on, then you probably would give up. I can absolutely see that. But if the world changes, if the future normal is that, then people are, I guess, are more likely to follow that. But a really interesting question, and wonderful to see UNEP, FAO, European Commission. So I hope you're from some very amazing organisation, because you've got quite an act to follow.
Well, I'm with, my name is Michael Brand, I'm with the University of Guelph in Canada. Just kind of commenting on that, I think one of the key pieces that we need to always remember is we are trying to make large
Hello, my name is Lisa Wallis from the University of Liverpool, and today I would like to present our recent project, Moving a Problem from A to B, a qualitative analysis of behavioural and health problems.
In the aggregate. So when you talked about like replacing all of these things that I'm doing in my diet, like, yeah, I might give up on that. However, if, say, everyone just eats a little less meat, overall in the world, that adds up to quite a lot of decrease. Or I buy a certain product just a little less, or I don't buy all of my products in leather. I buy some leather alternatives. There is a profound buildup of advancement with that. And then over time, I just do more and more. And it just seems like not a huge deal, right? So I think that while to face, we want to make change now, but it is also an evolution in time, because when we're talking about changing behavior, people don't like to change, but if they change a little bit over time, they don't even notice that they're changing. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Really good point. I think we're coming to the end of our time for this session. Is there any final question? One final question at the back, and then we'll wrap up.
Thanks again for giving me the floor. Just I want to share with you an event I attended 3 years ago, just before the COVID, on sustainable fashion. And the key conclusion coming out is the lack of communication. And people, they don't really know how much from where our clothes come from. Even when they know that the leather is coming from animal, but they don't know the process, how we can get this leather and the jacket, and how the animal are suffering, and so on and so on, and all what is the impact on the animals' welfare, but also on the environment. So I think this is the key aspect we have to consider that can help to change our behavior. That communication, I think, is one of the key aspects on animal behavior, but not to look to alternative as the moment. The alternative are good, but still are expensive. I mean, just an example, having some clothes which are made from plants, so it costs 3 times that the normal fashion. But the communication that will help us to change our behavior, I think, is still the key. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I just want to finish the session by saying thank you very much to Aída and Rebeca. I'm sure you agree, as a sister act, they were pretty impressive. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is not translation.
No, I've noticed that, so I need to say that I'll come up.
Brilliant. So now we have got 3, as I mentioned earlier, 3 oral presentations covering 3 different perspectives. And the first one is the application of evaluation of animal welfare at group level in the process of shearing while vicuñas. And I'm delighted to introduce Beatriz Zapata from the Veterinary School at Universidad Santo Toma, Vina del Mar in Chile. Beatriz, Yeah, is that, or you could prefer to stand or sit? Yeah. And yes, there you go. Yeah. There you go. Okay. Yeah, okay. Are you going to be able to see that? Okay. Okay.
Muy buenos días a todos y todas.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the work that I did with Gisela Marcopido about the application of the evaluation of animal welfare at the crude level in the process of seeding wild vicuñas during this year. First of all, vicuñas are like guanacos, and they are wild animals that have been protected, scamolids, and they have been protected because they have been used, and mostly their yarn, because it's one of the most precious one of these kind of wild animals. But they are not so much at risk precisely thanks to the several preservation programs to guarantee the conservation of vicuñas. The shear of vicuñas is called chacu since the time of the Incas, and it was the way in which they got this specific wool, very fine kind of camelid wool. And we've been doing the shearing every year in Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, Chile, but less frequently in those countries. The yarn that we get, as you can see in the pictures, it's processed and is sent almost everything to Italy, where, I don't know if you can see it, but here it is. Just a second. Is it here? Yes, here it is. The yarn to prepare these extremely luxury items of clothing. So people who actually are rearing these vicuñas will never be able to afford a vicuña yarn coat. But nonetheless, the chacu is something that is very popular, and handling this kind of animals can be sustainable as long as it includes animal welfare. That's why shearing is a process that starts by moving the animals, trolling them using these motorbikes or by walking or mixing both options. And once the animals are taken to these areas where they are going to be sheared, they will stay in this area, in this courtyard for a time. They would prepare like a pen in the territory. And what we do is we do the shearing, and then once the shear is fulfilled, we just send them away because these are wild animals. They are not domestic animals. This is a very stressful event, and we've been doing some monitoring of it to assess the stress the animals suffer. And several studies have been performed to understand the physiological variables that are affected during the handling, but also during the shearing, as well as the biological impacts of this process and how it affects the survival of the vicuñas. So the next question will be, if all these studies that we have already done allows us to actually assess the animal welfare during the shearing process by having operational indicators that will be easy to assess by everyone that is part of this process. Just to summarize, these are some of the potential challenges that we can find during the shearing. For example, these animals are taken to a specific place, so they might not be eaten for a period of time. So they will be doing some forward fasting, they can get injured during this process. They might have eye issues like myopathy through this process. The female vicuñas can lose their babies if they're pregnant throughout the trawling. There can be fights between the animals, and there can be also thermal stress, because this is a complex area where temperature can vary a lot during the morning, midday, afternoon, and evening, because it's in a territory 5,000 feet above sea level. And aside from all of this, what we started with the study, we review all the literature, previous literature, of studies that were assessing this shearing of the wild guanacos and the vicuñas. Guanacos are slightly bit bigger as animals, and so we didn't compare everything because they're not the same kind of animals, but we check different sources and we search for the keywords: shearing, stress, welfare, guanaco, vicuña, sustainability, behavior. We use different period of year from 1995 to 2023. And what we did was to review all the different indicators that have been used to describe what happened with the animals during the shearing process. And finally, what we did is with each indicator, we decided whether it was valid, if it was trustworthy, and if we could actually assess it by using from low, moderate, and highly valid. And this is more or less what we found. The graphics shows the percentage of, in this case, how easy it is to assess, how much we can trust this information, or how valid it is, these different indicators. So there were some of these indicators that were 100% these three different options. Based on behavior, each one of these indicators were easy to assess, trustworthy, and valid. In terms of good health, only cortisol, fecal cortisol, as well as breathing and cardiac frequency. And in terms of validity, well, there were some indicators as well. In terms of feeding, there was only a good indicator, which was the general body condition. And this is the moderate element. And here, for good health, there were some indicators like glycemia and hematocritus that were not so valid. They were only moderately one, because glycemia can spike up fast and it's difficult to identify moderate, low, or severe stress levels. But the fact that when you are at this kind of height, some results, like for example, the hematocrit values are not so trustworthy. And then the other indicators are based on the blood samples, and sometimes it's not that easy to take the samples in a more commercial situation instead of in a study. And in terms of the spaces where they were staying, we only took into consideration the density in the pens, and there was not a lot of clarity in the different publications and articles explaining how long they stayed, if it was adequate or not. So here, well, it was of a moderate validity. And finally, in the minimum values, what we found was these different physiological indicators, precisely because it's very difficult to evaluate and assess some of the measures taken on the field, but also because they have to get to the lab. That takes time, and for that same reason, those who are part of the process are not 100% sure that everything is correct and that whether they should correct something or not. And to conclude, first of all, there were not enough indicators, operational ones, to check the adequate conditions of feeding and the pen conditions, because we only had one of these indicators. We wanted to have better indicators for health as well, because most of the ones used were physiological ones that tend to be assessed at the lab with samples taken to the lab. And finally, we believe that in the future, the research should validate some operational indicators that should not be invasive and should be practical and easy to measure through the shearing process, so that we can actually evaluate in a trustworthy, easy, and valid way the whole process, so that we can have that information for the producers that are in this region. Thank you.
Beatriz, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Beatriz? Yes, one here. If it's in English, then if
Bueno, buenos días. Yo soy Débora.
Hello, I'm from the Veterinary College of Buenos Aires in Argentina. Betty, I love this presentation. I want to congratulate you, but I have two questions. First, will have to do whether you have noticed in the indicators that you were assessing any differences between when the animals were moved with the motorbikes or by walking next to them, and also in terms of the body condition. The rest of the indicators have more to do with the impact of the handling and the shearing process on the welfare of these animals. But about the body condition, I don't know if you measure it before or after, because if it is during, you're telling us about what the animal is doing, but we don't have the whole information about the impact. And if you do it after, how long does it take to do that? Thank you, Deborah, for the questions. The second I remember better, which has to do with the body condition. Okay, this is what we found in the literature. So it was assessed like one single element in the process. But I think that there are different elements to be considered. First, you need to have an assessment before. This is something that happens during a day, this whole process. So before the shearing, you need to check if an animal is not in an adequate condition, should not go through the shearing. The condition will not change during the shearing itself, but it can afterwards if that animal was not in optimal conditions before the shearing. Like, for example, a miscarriage if it's a female animal, or even death if it's a younger animal. And what was the first question? Yes. It's better if they do it walking instead of the mixed or the motorcycle. Time is of the matter, but it's less stressful if there's no motorbikes involved. And we measure that through the cortisol levels. Hello. Excellent presentation. My question has to do with if you measure or you have an indicator about behaviors, because you're talking about stress, and stress is a key indicator. But did you have any other kind of measure? Well, I mentioned it very fast and very briefly, but yes. With vicuñas, we haven't considered that so much, but there are some indirect indicators. Like, for example, the distance they have to be trolled to the pen, the time they're kept in the pen. These are indirect indicators of the handling. But in terms of the response behaviors like spitting, kicking, that kind of behavior and also to resist the handling. They were included, they were on the list, but I didn't have time enough to read them aloud. Thank you. That's it?
Indeed. We better move on to our next, but that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much indeed. So now we're going to move on to the world of rescue dogs, moving a problem from A to B, a qualitative analysis of behavioural and health problems in imported rescue dogs. And Lisa Wallis from the University of Liverpool is going to be providing this presentation.
Hear me. Thank you so much for the introduction. I wish I could be at the conference in person to meet you all, but today I would like to talk to you about the welfare of rescue dogs. So, the importation of rescue dogs into the UK is currently a hot topic in the media. The number of dogs being imported has increased in the last few years, as has the number of dogs infected with diseases such as Brucella canis. It's become a controversial topic as to whether importing these dogs is the right thing to do. There are two methods of importing dogs into the UK. The first is called the Pet Travel Scheme, and it's for non-commercial transport, and it's used for dogs travelling with their owners. The second is regulated by the Balai Directive, which governs the commercial movement of dogs. Dogs imported using this method are to be rehomed or sold and include rescue dogs. They can also include owned dogs travelling separately from their owners. For both these methods of importation, the dogs must have a pet passport or health certificate, a rabies vaccination, a microchip, and a tapeworm treatment. Dogs transported commercially also need to be inspected by a vet 48 hours before travel, and if they're coming from a non-listed country, they must be seen by an EU vet at a border inspection point. Currently, there are no requirements to apply tick or flea treatment or for any pre-import disease testing. There is also little to no physical inspection of the dogs post-import to the UK. This graph shows the number of dogs imported into the UK using the Pet Travel Scheme and the Balai Directive by year. Since the introduction of the Pet Travel Scheme, the number of dogs that have entered the UK has increased. Importation was reduced during COVID-19 due to travel restrictions. However, during this time, dogs that were transported commercially increased quite significantly. So, if we look at owner surveys, in one study using an owner questionnaire by Barrio et al., 11% of owners of imported rescue dogs were given inaccurate or little to no information on the health of their new pet. Most had consulted with a vet during the first month of adoption. 16% of dogs had one or more health issues, and 3 dogs were euthanized, unfortunately, within the first 3 months. Another study that also utilized an owner questionnaire reported that 89% of rescue dogs were imported using the EU Pet Travel Scheme, which is the incorrect method. 20% of the dogs were transported with known health issues, with the most common being traumatic injury. There has been very little research into the most common behavioural problems found in imported rescue dogs. The most common problems reported by Norman et al. Were fear of strange noises and objects, refusing to come when called, pulling on the lead, fear towards strangers, and chasing small animals. Most owners who sought training or behavioural help reported that it resolved the behavioural issues. So the aim of this study was to qualitatively investigate stakeholder and owner experience of health and behavioural problems seen in imported rescue dogs in the UK. In the current study, 54 stakeholders participated in either an interview or a focus group. All participants were assigned to 10 categories, which could be found in the table, and each individual could belong to more than one category. Interviews were conducted with 30 people, and a total of 16 people participated in 4 focus groups. The focus groups were held for veterinary professionals, dog trainers, local authority animal health officers, and owners of rescue dogs which have been affected by Brucella canis. Threads from 3 publicly available online forums were identified through searches, and from these relevant threads, 18 were selected for coding that included a variety of different behaviours and topics. Unfortunately, only 6 threads from each forum were selected due to time constraints. The interview and focus group transcripts and the online forum data were interrogated to explore emerging themes and identify similarities and differences. The qualitative research software NVivo was used for data analysis. On the left, you can see an example transcript extract from an owner interview. In the middle are some of the examples of the codes used to categorize the data. And as the data was coded and compared, the categories were produced and patterns were established to develop a framework of core themes grounded in the research data. 6 key themes were identified around the topics of health and behavior. Within health, 4 main themes were identified: unfit for transport, welfare during transport, infectious disease, and owner expectations. The theme owner expectations also had several sub-themes. The first health theme was unfit for transport. Clear illegal landings occurred when dogs were transported in the last 10% of their gestation and as underage puppies, or if it was clear other non-compliances with health requirements had occurred. The second health theme, welfare during transportation, included injuries, infectious disease and parasite spread, gastroenteritis, pancreatitis, dehydration and poor body condition, which was reported by new owners when their dog arrived at their home. The next health theme was infectious disease. Dogs were reportedly transported with exotic diseases, including brucellosis and leishmaniasis. Veterinary surgeons emphasised the difficulty of persuading owners to carry out post-import disease testing and discussed the introduction of mandatory testing for zoonotic diseases. The final health theme was owner expectations, as these often did not align with reality after the dog arrived and led to costly surprises. Owners reported that they were not given the correct information from rescue organisations and in some cases veterinary professionals. The owner expectations theme also included trust in veterinarians and scaremongering. The increasing number of imported rescue dogs in the UK led to some veterinarians and surgeries insisting on post-import disease tests and even revaccinations, as they did not trust that the information in the dog's passport was correct. This mistrust is aimed at overseas vets who may falsify information or provide inadequate vaccine dosage for financial gain, possibly. Because of this mistrust, owners are increasingly being asked to pay for vaccinations and tests that they did not think they needed. And this has resulted in a reduced trust in UK veterinary surgeons and companies, as they are perceived to be trying to make a profit from overseas rescues. After the first dog-to-human transmission of Brucella canis in 2022, owners, rescues and veterinary surgeons became panicked about perceived zoonotic risk, and much scaremongering was found on the internet, with sources of evidence-based facts difficult to find. The final health theme from owner expectations was mental health impact. Here we focused on the impact on owners. One owner described how she was so worried about the results of a blood test for her dog, she effectively grieved for her dog for a month, as the only option given to her was euthanasia. Another owner was worried as she had multiple dogs, and as Brucella canis can be passed between dogs, they could all test positive. A final owner experienced very complex health issues in their supposedly healthy imported rescue dog and received no help or support from the rescue organisation, which resulted in significant mental health impact. The topic of behaviour had 3 main themes: novelty, autonomy and owner expectations. Each main theme contained sub-themes, which I'll present evidence on. The first main theme was novelty, as some dogs were reported to encounter difficulties with new environments, objects or strangers. This was problematic not only for the owners, but also for veterinary professionals who were trying to treat them. The second sub-theme of novelty was interacting with people. Generally, dogs are felt to eventually get used to their owner's presence, although this could take a long time, but they could still struggle with strangers. Participants mentioned that many of the negative interaction occurred specifically between a male owner and the dog, or strange men, which the owners perceived as a nervousness of men. Wariness of people made seeking veterinary care difficult, and in some cases included resulting in a bite risk to veterinary professionals. Reactivity to other dogs was also problematic in some cases, typically towards unknown dogs, but there was also cases of aggression towards other dogs in the household. The second main theme was autonomy. When resource guarding was experienced, it was recognised to be a consequence of experiences in their former environment, but it negatively impacted both the owner emotions and the dogs involved. Interactions with cats ranged from desirable to killing the cat. Some of these dogs were thought to be discarded hunting dogs, and this was used to explain the high prey drive of certain individuals. Dealing with restraint was also a theme. Some owners struggled with using physical restraint tools such as leads and collars. The dog's inability to cope with them was shown to be linked to confinement and a desire to escape. Owners reported some dogs to feel secure by a crate, while others felt confined by it. Dogs were described as having a desire to escape from restraint, including jumping out of gardens over fences or from transport vehicles. Finally, a main theme was around owner expectations of the dog's behaviour and how that was experienced in reality. A major sub-theme was the perceived suitability of the dog to the owner's situation. The owners mentioned several factors associated with suitability, which influenced whether the adoption was a success. The combination of all these factors meant that owners often had unrealistic expectations, and when these were not met, it could eventually lead to a desire to relinquish the dog. Where owners were willing and able to commit to imported rescue dogs, they found the experience rewarding despite the difficulties encountered. Hard work, patience, and long-term commitment were recognised as necessary by owners to progress and reach a suitable standard with their dog, and for some the journey was ongoing. Nevertheless, some perceived the dog's behavioural problems to be too much work and couldn't cope. Different interventions were used, including behaviourists, drugs and supplements, environmental management, and owner management. Owners perceived that the rescue had a strong responsibility to provide support, and obviously this could be financially challenging. To sum up the results from the health topic, some dogs were non-compliant with regulations and were imported illegally. During transportation, dogs' welfare was compromised as they were imported with known and unknown health issues. Dogs were also transported with exotic diseases, and since there's a lack of pre-import testing for exotic and zoonotic diseases, these were often only diagnosed when the dogs were in the UK. Owners were sometimes not given correct information from the rescue organisation and even veterinary professionals, which resulted in reduced trust in UK veterinary surgeons and those abroad. Panic about the perceived zoonotic risk resulted in scaremongering, particularly on the internet and in the media. To sum up the behavioural results, many dogs struggled with the extent of novelty and were often very nervous on arrival, taking time to settle into their new environments. Owner expectations didn't align with reality once the dog arrived, as the dogs were often not well matched to the household or displayed unacceptable behaviours. Rescue organisations were perceived to have a moral responsibility to provide accurate information and support to adopters. We had a few potential recommendations to improve the situation, such as education and support for stakeholder groups using consistent guidance, enhanced pre-adoption screening for rehoming, and detailed information on the dog's health and behaviour to improve the likelihood of a positive experience. Owners could be better prepared by the rescue to cater for their dog's needs and be provided with realistic expectations, and testing for zoonotic diseases should be implemented before and again on arrival to the UK. Official UK and EU dog transportation guidelines need to be produced and promoted, and improved monitoring of transport processes is needed to protect animal welfare during transport. And with that, I would like to thank our funder and to all the people who participated, and I hope we have time for a few questions. Here are my references and also my contact details if you'd like to get in touch with me. Thank you very much.
Lisa, thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation, certainly a lot to dwell on there. I haven't got any questions online at the moment. Any questions in the audience for Lisa? Yes, question at the back here.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was a really good presentation, some really good statistics there. Oh, sorry, Linda Evans from Sparna doing global animal welfare. Forgot that, Roly. I'm wondering, when people are bringing rescue dogs over from other countries, whether they're actually considering what the animal wants. Are they actually improving the quality of life of that animal? And one really good example are cats, stray cats picked up off a beach in the Caribbean, where they're probably having a lovely life, brought to the UK with a long journey. And just because someone in the UK thinks they can give them a better life, I think that's quite an important factor.
Yeah, we had examples of both sides of the story. So we had successful reintroductions, so where they would take an animal, you know, for example, that they found on holiday and manage to integrate it into UK sort of society. But we also had some quite unfortunate episodes where this did not work out as expected. And you're right, so the motivations that people have to help these dogs, it's a very, very strong emotion. People describe looking on social media and instantly feeling a connection with an animal that could be many thousands of miles away and wanting to help that animal. And rather than, unfortunately, possibly donating money to help that animal in its own country, it's perceived maybe almost as the thing to do here in the UK at the moment is to help these animals by bringing them here to the UK and giving them what is perceived to be, you know, a forever home and a good home. So yeah, not much thought is really going into it. We're also finding evidence in particular countries as well that some dogs are being purchased or bred even for rescue trade, which is obviously not something that we want to see happening. What we want is for these animals to find a good home, obviously, hopefully within their country that they're living in if possible, and as a last resort, maybe in some cases they can be moved. But it's an international problem, it's not UK only, it's everywhere. And it's really interesting to talk to people about what's going on in other countries as well. So thank you very much for your question, and I know we've run out of time.
Thanks, Lisa. We've actually got time for one more question. I can imagine strong emotions. If someone took me from a Caribbean beach and took me back to the UK, I think I'd have pretty strong emotions. But there we question from online. Isn't the fact that there are fights an indicator of overcrowding and lack of well-being?
So fights in shelters or fights in the home. So one of the things that's interesting about overseas rescue dogs in the UK in particular, owners are likely to have more than one dog. So it seems that people who rescue these types of dogs have multi-dog households. And you're right, it can get quite complicated the more dogs you bring in, especially if you don't know very much about the health or the behavior of the dog that you're bringing in. And then managing, obviously, the behaviors of the dogs in the house can be a problem. And that's where, for example, what we call rescue backup is really important, a support from the rescue itself that can take that dog out of that environment and hopefully find it a more suitable home. But yes, you're correct. Obviously, having a lot of dogs all together in a small space can be difficult to manage their behavior-wise and also welfare-wise as well.
And Lisa, a question from me, I suppose, a double-parter. Doing pre-import checks, do you see there's any appetite, either from the UK or any other environment, to have that, make that a regulatory requirement? And is there a danger if we increase the requirements of the trade that more of the trade will be driven underground?
Yeah, so that is a topic that we have covered as well. So it seems unlikely that they're going to push for mandatory testing. I don't think that's going to be the case. What it's going to be is a gold standard for the rescue. So they're going to be provided, obviously, with guidance. And a lot of them are actually already implementing this and doing the appropriate testing. So, but unfortunately, because rescue in the UK is not regulated in any way, anyone, even myself, for example, tomorrow could set up a new rescue and start to import dogs over to the UK. So what we need to do is try to provide this gold standard, try to get owners to look at this and see these are the ethical rescues that are working responsibly for welfare for the dog, and hopefully these other individuals and smaller rescues that are not following these gold standards will go by the wayside, and this is what we're hoping, yes.
And do you think that strong emotion that you talked about earlier is going to make it difficult for owners or prospective owners to consider those gold standards, especially if it's going to make it more difficult in their minds to be able to get a dog?
We've got a lot of owners who have had bad experiences who are campaigning now for some of these changes to go into place, because at the end of the day, it's about not only, welcoming a new family member, but it's also about improving the welfare of that animal. So it's really important that any changes that are made are for the welfare. Sorry, and I know we've run out of time, but thank you so much for your questions. It's been great.
Lisa, thank you so much. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for a really insightful presentation. We loved it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to something far more closer to home for me as somebody who works with World Horse Welfare on the empirical treatments for colic in 4 regions of Colombia and its implications in animal welfare. And I'm delighted that Maria Cataño from the CES University of Medellin in Colombia is going to be providing this presentation.
A few months, we plunged into an adventure in Colombia, learning more about the curious way of dealing with colic and working equids. For example, in Antioquia, to our surprise, and I presume yours as well, the most common treatment for colic is to give some beer to the animals, and we understood that each region developed its own technique. Hello, my name is Alejandra Agudelo. I'm a student of the last year of training in veterinary medicine in the CES University, and I have a passion for animals. Today, I will be talking to you about empirical treatments for colic in working equids in 4 regions of Colombia and its implication in animal welfare. I work in this project together with my advisor, Santiago Henao Villegas, from the working group of the CES University, and with Francisco René Ramírez of the Incasas group in the same university, Carolina Jaramillo Gómez, Sergio Andrés Pizarro from Fundación Arrieros, Colombia, and Jessica Burrich and John Vorford from the Nottingham University. Colombia has approximately 1.5 million working equids. This figure proves precisely the financial dependence of this species to ensure food security. On the other hand, a colic is a very frequent disease in equids that live in close proximity to humans due to handling and feeding conditions. But between 90 and 95% of the cases are not fatal. Nonetheless, these figures change when we talk about working equids, because these have a higher risk of dying due to a colic precisely because of the harsh social economic conditions and the difficult access to the areas, as well as the lack of access to veterinary care. That's why the owners have been forced to find different treatment options, trying to have a solution, as their working equids are their livelihoods and the cornerstone of their well-being. That's the relevance of establishing the commonly used treatments in these rural areas and to assess their efficiency when symptoms do appear. So we assess 4 municipalities included in the study: Santa Marta, Cocorná, Apartadó, and Andes. In Santa Marta, we work with 2 communities, Catunsama between the river and the Palomino, and Machete Pelao, located in the lowlands of the low mountain range in Santa Marta. Here, equids play a key role for tourism transportation of the families and the crops. In Antioquia, we work in the municipality of Andes, and there we focus the work in Vereda Santa Rita. The economy here is based mostly on agriculture, livestock, mining, and trade. Mainly, they have coffee crops, plantations, banana crops, sugarcane, beans, yucca crops, and other fruits. Animal husbandry is also very relevant. Mainly, they have cattle, equine, and swine farms, and there are silver, ballast, and gold mines. In Cocorná is also located in Antioquia and borders with the municipalities of Santuario, Granada, San Luis, and Francisco, among others. Their economy depends on tourism, as they have the ideal geographical conditions, as well as plenty of water sources. They also have guava crops, bananas, sugarcane, and livestock is also very relevant here. Last but not least, the municipality of Apartadó is located at the northeast of Antioquia. There, they work in an area where the main economic activity is the banana plantations, the cacao beans, and timber, as well as livestock. But that's a smaller part of the economy there. When we arrived to each one of these municipalities, we did a quick inspection to identify the working equids, their living conditions, and to know a bit more about, well, the way of these communities as well as their needs. Data collection was carried out using easy surveys in order to gather information from the owners about how they use their working equids, what kind of equids they have, whether they're mules, donkeys, horses, where the animals rest, and worried and ready they are to deal when a colic happens. We found out that the main treatments were, in general, the most frequent were beer, 63%, avocado, 20%, cooking oil, 13%. But also, we found it quite interesting to identify what is used where, as each region has its own particular nuances. So we found that in Andes, the most used solution is beer, followed by avocado. In Apartado, things are quite similar. In fact, the most common treatment is beer, followed by other treatments like vinegar and avocado again. In Gatun Sama, there was a wide variety of treatments for colic, like, for example, using plants like the calabash tree, the gliricidia, the chicory, as well as, again, beer, soft drinks, urine, and even ashes. In Machete Pelao, the situation was more or less the same, as, again, beer was the most common option, but with a difference we found quite interesting here, as while they were drinking the beer, they were hitting the abdomen of the animals with a wet bag. So we asked them why, and they explained to us that it was precisely by doing so that they scared the equids. And when the animals are scared, they contract the abdomen, and that cures the colic. In Cocorna, they use beer, but also bile from the spot paca to treat the colic. So to sum up, all these working equids play a key role to maintain animal, human, and environmental welfare. We can see this as like a blockbuster with superheroes and villains, and the equid would be the hero that preserves the community, that helps the community, takes care of it, but we have to be very careful with the very big bad, which is the colic, that can appear in the plot to break havoc in the community's economy and welfare. And people, in their eagerness to keep their beloved working equids healthy, sometimes resort to treatments that are not based on any scientific evidence, but they always do so with the intention of getting a happy ending to their story. Working equids welfare is connected to human and community's welfare, and that is, for me, the take-home message that I wanted for all you. So thank you very much for your attention and for listening.
Unfortunately, Lisa can't join us online. If you know, it's about 4:10 in Colombia, or 4:15 Colombia in the morning. So we don't have any questions for Lisa. So we do have a little bit of time now for general discussion about the topics we've talked about during the course of the first session on One Welfare and fashion. Starting with, obviously, Rebeca and Aída's discussion around the fashion industry, and then obviously looking at 3 different examples, animal-relevant examples. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to make before we break for coffee? Not seeing any. In which case, I assume we can... Rebeca, I think you need to make some announcements, so if you could come forward, that'd be great.
Thank you, Roly. Thank you, everybody. It's just a very brief announcement for those of you that are here in Burgos. In case you are staying for a little bit after the 11th, we are organizing a dinner for people that is staying over, if you would like to join in a group. So if anybody would like to join, we are taking a list of people. Also for the Thursday, 12, we have a... Sorry, I can see that's Lisa. Maria Alejandra, yes, she was there. So sorry. We will connect back with the video in a second. I thought she was not connecting, but we will connect her. I'll finish the announcement, my apologies, and then we rejoin. Thursday the 12th, there will be a visit to Atapuerca remains, and there is a few people that has expressed an interest. From Atapuerca, we will go to a monastery called San Pedro Cardeña to visit with an organized visit and then meal. So again, those interested, please note. And Placidia there is taking the list, so if you could please stand up so people can see who you are in the audience. The third row by the aisle. So if you go to her and give her your name, we will make a list and then we will count you all four. Thank you, and my apologies, Roly.
Are you happy to speak to me because I'm not sure how English?
Yes, and of course. So yeah, my apologies. It was a long day yesterday, and yeah, we worked until late to prepare the keynote. Lisa, buenos días, Lisa.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to have you here. I want to make sure that you listen to us. Alejandra, sorry. Alejandra, can you hear us? Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I don't know whether you need translation, okay, but I will be here anyway in case you need any translation, okay? Our apologies for the misunderstanding, but we have a round of questions for Alejandra, if we like. Perfect.
Y tenemos ya una pregunta.
And we have a question for you, in fact. In the first row of the stage, Beatriz Zapata wants to ask you something, and she's from Chile. Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. My question, and I am Beatriz Zapata, from Chile. My question is, do you have any scientific basis for the treatments that you use with animals? Beer, I heard about beer and some plants. Do you have any scientific, support for that? Yeah. That was the start of the study in our sector.
We wanted to research a bit more about precisely what it was all about. We wanted to start, there are several stages in this research where we wanted to see the different treatments. That was the first part, and then we wanted to see if there was a science base. Why they're giving these to the animals to treat the colic, and to find the reasons why, the beliefs they have. And we want in the next stage to assess if there is a scientific reasoning behind these treatments. Thank you.
Sí, tenemos otra pregunta para.
Curious to know, during your surveys and focus group discussions or interviews, I guess you had key informant interviews, how did you guard against social desirability bias, sesgo de confirmación? How did you ensure that the data you're receiving from your qualitative assessment wasn't biased by social aspects? Thank you.
La pregunta, espero traducirla bien.
She's just translating the question into Spanish for the speaker. Well, in each community, and thank you for the question, it's an important one. In each one of the communities, we have a specific methodology, taking always into consideration who we were going to talk to. And depending on the community, we needed to assess and adapt the methodology to talk with them and to find that information that we were looking for. And each one of these areas, we had a big group of people. People came voluntarily to join us. It was a big group. And we were able to gather all that information. I don't know if that actually answered your question.
Are there any other questions for Alexandra. Alexandra, if I may ask, one of the themes that has come through this morning's talks, or today's talks, is around human behaviour change. Do you have thoughts on taking the results of this survey and in terms of changing owners' behaviour to improve the treatment and the outcomes for the animals suffering from colic? Do you have thoughts on what behaviour change techniques you might implement?
Y te traduzco, espero correctamente la pregunta.
And now they're translating the question for the speaker.
Sobre el cambio de comportamiento, cómo conseguir un cambio de comportamiento. Y se pregunta si con los resultados que estáis teniendo en vuestra encuesta, en vuestro trabajo de investigación y los tratamientos que se están utilizando y quizás los fallos, ¿no?, que están teniendo o la falta de éxito que esos tratamientos están teniendo, si ya tenéis en mente ¿cómo podríais incentivar ese cambio de comportamiento una vez terminado vuestro estudio con vuestra recogida de datos? Si tenéis alguna técnica en particular o alguna idea.
Sí, incluso el fin de recoger toda esta información.
Yes, the aim precisely to gather all this information is to educate the population so that they will know how to treat colic based on their own resources, improving the welfare of the animals. So that's the aim of the study. That's the main objective of this study, actually.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any final questions? Is there one at the back? Yes, there's one at the back.
Hello. Hola, Amelia, de la Universidad de Nottingham. Te lo hago en castellano, pero...
I'm from the Nottingham University. I'm going to make my question in Spanish so that Rebeca doesn't have to translate it. But based on the question, if one of these treatments like beer, because I see beer is the most popular treatment in this region. So if you can go and tell them that scientifically there's no base for using beer, but they need to give them beer, otherwise they might feel like the animal will not get better. Do you think it would be a good option to keep on giving beer, but maybe adding something extra that might be more scientifically based? Or just to change everything from scratch, I don't know, to convince them that the beer is not really doing anything? I mean, it's like a placebo, if you like. Any of the two options. Well, I think that is a work in progress. We need to do it step by step, understanding the beliefs of these people. They've been using this treatment for years now. So we need to identify the treatments and to understand why they're using these treatments. And with that, and that's why I explained as a next step to educate and to start mixing the previous treatments with new treatments. And the main issue is that there are no vets working in this area that can help them with the colics. There's nobody who will go and say, well, your horse has a colic for this reason and you can do this. There's no one to do that. So by bringing that to them, to showing them alternatives, might improve all these aspects. And maybe it will respect what they already believe. Thank you, Alejandra. I have a question myself. So all of the different treatments that you mentioned, like beer, avocado, cooking oil, these are things that we're eating ourselves as humans. So my question is that if these are also used as medical options for humans, thinking again on the interconnection between animals and humans, if someone has a colic, will they drink beer, eat some avocado as well? Well, I'm not sure to say yes, that's what they do. But we've seen it. And we tried in many occasions. They tend to do what they do for themselves with their animals as well. But it would be interesting to do a bit more on research about that parallelism that you mentioned. Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for your question.
That brings us to the end of the session, but thank you so much, and especially for getting up so early in the morning.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much.
So we're now going to take a break, and I think we're due back at 12:15. I think we're due back at 12:15. I'll just check that. And so we're going to have coffee, and then if you could be back, 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. So they're just over half an hour for coffee outside the auditorium. But thank you so much. That concludes the One Welfare and Fashion theme. I have to say, when Rebecca initially suggested to me that I chair this, I wondered why. But I have to say, it's been a fascinating few hours discussing. And I think it's interesting. We've taken a very wide view of it, from the design perspective to different perspectives directly involving animals. And it's amazing how constant themes come through around changing people's behaviour, about the importance of education, around the importance of communication. So I think we can take those thoughts forward as we go for the next 3 themes, which personally I can't wait for. Thank you very much indeed.